Yes, I do have photos going back quite a long time, really, back in my life. Probably, photography has been a pretty important part of my life from probably about standard four, actually, at school when I began to get interested in what you could actually do with a camera, well, actually use a camera. My first camera was actually my grandfather's Kodak bellows camera. Or when I say bellows, it actually you pulled open the front of it, and the apparatus sort of come out with a sort of a paper bellows. A very basic camera. Took a black and white big film, and not probably about 3 inches by 2 inches type size. So certainly a good size film, and you got quite a good print from it. The cameras had virtually no settings. You basically had to try and just aim it and hope that what you took was best. They had a very long focal length and very wide range of lighting, so they performed pretty well under a lot of conditions, particularly outside, not perhaps so great inside. No flash or anything, and it had a wee thing that you press, like a bit of a wire with a sort of a thing you pressed and it operated the shutter, so it didn't have even an ordinary shutter thing. So certainly no autofocus or auto exposure or anything like that. It was well, auto in the fact it was always on the same setting. But that camera was great, and that got me into the whole thing really, as I began to take photos of a range of things around me and see what happened. Obviously, in those days, for a long time, it was film that you used, and you had to take your 12 or whatever photos it was, and then have them developed. So you didn't do very many in a year, and you were fairly careful with what you actually tried to take. But that's really how I got into it, and I was pretty interested right from the start actually in terms of the whole process and how it actually went. My father was also quite a keen photographer. He took lots of photos on his tours, and his slides are in my program. He took primarily slides, as we used to call them, or transparencies, which would then be shown by a projector on a screen. And he was pretty keen on that. Again, probably challenging in terms of taking the photos, because the camera he had, well, it was quite a good 35mm transparency camera, whatever you call them in those days. The settings were very basic, and so it was really almost hit and miss, and you hope you had the exposure right, and you hope that you had the speed right. And he didn't use a light meter or anything. There was nothing to actually indicate what was ideal. So some of his photos were often a little either under or overexposed. But nevertheless, I was quite fascinated with that as well. And while I never ever used this camera really, it was interesting to see how he actually went about using it and what the photos looked like. My next main camera was really a Kodak Instamatic camera, which I must have got probably at about intermediate stage, and that camera took me right through many years. The old Instamatic camera was actually quite a good little camera, because it took a range of type of film, both transparencies through to black and white through to colour prints. Even though it was still not automatic in terms of the settings, and it was quite restricted in terms of what you could actually take, they were pretty good in terms of the range of lighting and speed, and it did a pretty good job actually. So that got me through a range of photos, and those Instamatic photos are in the various photo albums that I've got on the that I've scanned in and so on. Again, quite interested in the whole photography process and trying to look at what a good photo might look like and so on. Yeah, when I left home and went to the airline, I still had my Instamatic and used that initially, but I eventually bought a Contax camera. That was called a Contax, which was a 35mm pretty high spec camera actually for its day, and had a full range of speed adjustment and exposure adjustment, and autofocus, which is certainly fairly new for cameras in those days. It was a I guess autofocus that actually allowed to, when I say autofocus, it wasn't a electronic autofocus, it was a use light and whatever to actually do that. So it was interesting. You had to bring the two images together on a screen, and when they sort of got together, you knew that you're in focus. Interesting technology, and that camera I took a lot of photos with, and it was really it was great to use. I really enjoyed it, and started to learn more about how to really use a camera. I got a light meter and began to take, I think, more interesting and yeah, like some of the flying photos that I took then, particularly like my flying photo of the 2 planes in formation, which I think was one of the great photos I took back then. Try to be a bit arty at times. So I was really got into it and realised that at that point photography was something I really enjoyed doing. Unfortunately, that camera broke down, or it broke, and even though I tried to get it repaired, in the end I couldn't get it repaired, and which is a pity actually, because it was the lenses were great, and it was a good camera. So, but it certainly got me going into photography in a very big way, and from then on I really had a range of cameras, mainly 35mm type ones, and began to think about the photos a lot more, get interested in how I actually took the photos, and probably, yeah, it just became an ongoing interest of mine. Over the probably my 20s, early 30s, probably less interested in some of the actual arty side of it, maybe, if you want to call it that, or the photo side of it. But certainly took lots of snaps or shots of family and activity and so on. But it was probably when I came back down to Dunedin and digital cameras began to come into vogue, began to develop, that really my current sort of passion, if you like, for photography began to take off again. And I've gone through, yeah, many digital cameras. I've currently got a D90 Nikon. To me, that's probably the best camera I'm ever going to have. It's the D40 I had was a tremendous camera, and I think that obviously digital photography has just made photography out there. But for me, I think having that background in early photography and being interested in some of the basics and what I can do with this made it just a bit more different to me in terms of using these current cameras, and that it's not just taking snapshots anymore. It's actually trying to take a photo which actually people can see what I was seeing and what I want people to see, and trying to be a little more up there. Obviously I'm not a great photographer. I'm not going to ever aspire to being a professional photographer, and I make lots of mistakes still, and but it's all very interesting, and you can just see that trail of how I've come through I guess a legacy of where photography's been the part of my life, and it's still there, and how it's special in the way I still do it. Whereas if I perhaps had just become a digital snapshotter in later life, I probably would have just been taking snapshots like everyone else, which is fine. Nothing wrong with taking snapshots. That's an important part of recording what's going on. But to me, a photo is a bit more than that, and it's certainly just became more and more aware of what it can be in terms of more than that, and how you actually go about trying to get that extra bit out of the image, and show what I'm seeing and what I want people to actually know that I'm seeing is a difference. And being aware of that when you actually work in that area really is the key thing. And I'm pleased I actually got to that point, and actually am enjoying that part of my activity. Photography's been great for me, and I hope I can do a lot more of it in the future while I can, and I will.